As we're just getting news of some breaking news here.
This is CNN Breaking News.
New York Police Department is reporting out that multiple people have been shot at a hospital here in New York City. This is in the Bronx. The NYPD has tweeted out a message asking people to stay away from the area of Bronx Lebanon Hospital. So this is what we have. NYPD tweeting out due to reports of a shooting. Avoid the area of 1650 Grand Concourse. More information to follow. This is the largest not-for-profit healthcare system serving South and Central Bronx. Provides more than 1.1 million visits annually. This is what's happening right now. Art Roderick is on the phone with me, CNN Law Enforcement Analyst. Art, talk us through what police are doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking the New York Police Department, which is one of the best police departments in the country when it comes to responding to not only active shooters, but also terrorist events. And please, I'm not saying this is a terrorist event, but a lot of times the same activity you would see around an active shooter event you would see around a terrorist event. So what you've got here, I'm sure they're going to have to put aviation up. It sounds like they've got the streets around the area blocked off. Now they're going to have to determine are there individuals that are injured beyond the ones that they've reported? Is this a barricade situation? Is this a hostage barricade situation? I'm sure they'll bring in hostage negotiators. They'll keep that place clear. They'll try to locate his vehicle, find out what the cause of this. This is going to be the big part of it. Is why did this individual do this? Is this something related to a domestic event, or is this something related to some other nefarious event? And we just don't have all that information in yet.
Sure. I'm just thinking of all the patients and all the families who are in that hospital. Art, stay with me. Tom Fuentes is with us as well, a former assistant FBI director and one of our senior law enforcement analysts. I mean, how do they, Tom, all the while, I'm sure they have police cordoning off the whole area on the roof, surrounding buildings. How do they safely and securely get these? I mean, these are patients hooked up to tubes and machines. Get them out. Make sure they're safe.
Well, for many of them, Brooke, I don't think they're going to try to be getting them all out. That could be more dangerous than anything for people that are critically ill and need to be, hooked up and wired up and in the hospital and not taken outside into 90-degree heat and nowhere safe outside. But a big part of this is going to be what do they have in terms of shooter or shooters, and if they have victims that are able to talk and describe who the person was and whether any of them knew the person or whether the person shouted out anything. Was it a personal matter? We've seen some of these kind of shootings where someone has gone to either a school or a hospital out to get a certain person, that it was a personal matter. So that could play into this also. But a big part of it is trying to identify, do they have one shooter, multiple shooters? Is the crime scene, if you will, is that pretty much confined to that hospital area, or did whoever did the shooting flee out into the neighborhood? And now, you have a bigger concern for the whole entire area. How do you lock down the whole area if they don't know where the shooter is? So
right. Well, apparently the reporting is, Tom, let me just jump in, that the line from the police now is that they are actively looking for the shooter. So they don't know, at least that they're not publicly saying where this individual is.
That's a huge problem, because if you're talking about a building like a hospital, then if that person is still in the building, they're going to have to look in every closet, under every bed, all over the facility, the heating plant rooms, possibly the air ducts. So that's a huge issue right there. If they can find witnesses that actually saw the shooter and then can maybe describe if the shooter fled and they saw him go out the front door, where they can give a physical description. So I'm sure the police right now are interviewing many key witnesses who will give them that kind of information, and they can dispatch that to the tactical units and other control units that have responded to the scene, and give them an idea of how many people they're looking for, what they look like, clothing descriptions, etc., and try to piece together what happened here.
how frightening this is. If you're just sort of tuning in and wondering what's going on, we're told by New York police that multiple people have been shot in this fairly large hospital in the Bronx, in the New York City area. Multiple people have been shot. We have no idea how badly, but they are telling us that they're actively looking for this shooter. Polo Sandoval is standing by live with a little bit more information. Polo, what do you know?
Well, Brooke, we know the key question right now is exactly where did this happen? Was it inside the hospital or outside? A spokesperson with the New York Police Department right now simply confirming, as you just said, several, or at least multiple individuals. We do not know, however, how serious they were injured. And also, again, as we mentioned, don't know whether or not it was inside that hospital. But we can confirm, according to information released by the New York City Police Department, that this call came out of this active shooter sometime before 3 p.m. and that they are still actively searching for that shooter. So again, a very fluid situation, but that's just some limited information that's been put out right now by authorities in the Bronx there, recommending that anybody in and around the area simply avoid it as they continue to track down the suspect involved here, Brooke.
Polo, thank you. Art Roderick, I mean, just looking at pictures of this building, it's massive. Multiple floors, everyone's been in a hospital, the corridors, the areas where you need a key pass to get in. We don't know if this is somebody who actually worked at the hospital, someone who came in, someone who was visiting a family member. But when you're looking for a person, it's almost like an ant in a haystack. How do you find the person?
Well, I mean, the security at these hospitals, they do this type of training, active shooter training, all the time. So it is going to be difficult. I mean, if the individual has fired a weapon, I'm sure there's plenty of witnesses in the location to at least describe where he's gone to. But it is an absolute worst-case scenario nightmare that this occurred in a hospital, in hallways. And we don't know the reason at this particular point in time. But, based on the social media information coming out from the PD, it looks like that, they have the situation controlled, at least as far as the hospital goes. Now it's just going to be a matter of making sure the patients, doctors, and the visitors are all safe within that location.
Tom Fuentes, when we're learning that the police are saying avoid the hospital, the area around the hospital, understand, there are police all around neighboring buildings, presumably on the roof, in the green area adjacent to the hospital, going off of what? Just suspect descriptions based upon eyewitness accounts?
Well, exactly, and they don't need more people showing up just to be nosy that are going to interfere with emergency vehicles that are arriving or interfere with other people calling in that, someone running around is possibly the suspect and they're chasing people who are innocent. So, they just don't want that. They don't need that. One of the other aspects is that you hope this hospital has extensive video surveillance system for security. Mm-hmm. And in which case the security officials from the hospital, as well as the police, can be reviewing that and try to get a description and try to get a video of the person coming into or exiting the hospital or running around inside in the corridors. That's a good description. And most hospitals have pretty extensive security because, don't forget, they also, within those hospitals, have a large supply of narcotics that are tempting for people to want to come in and steal, and of course the patients themselves. So you have a lot of things that go on in a hospital that make it very difficult for the police, very challenging. But hopefully that also means they have a more extensive surveillance system than the average workplace violence.
This is Bronx Lebanon Hospital. This is in the Bronx here in New York. It is a level 3 patient-centered medical home. ER gets about 140,000 visits a year. It is one of the busiest, we're told, in all of New York, and there has been a shooting within this hospital. Actually, let me be precise. We don't know where it was with regard to the hospital. We're just told it happened at the Bronx Lebanon Hospital. Don't know where in the hospital. We know that multiple people have been shot. We know that the call came in right around 2:50 Eastern time, so nearly an hour ago. Polo Sandoval, do I still have you standing by?
Brooke, right here.
Yeah, tell me more. I mean, are these? I presume these are live pictures, police presence outside. Tell me what you're learning.
You know, some of this information that we're picking up on social media from officials right now, Brooke, basically confirming some of these pictures and what we're seeing for ourselves here of this massive presence right now there in the Bronx at that location, which is 1650 Grand Concourse, which is the address of the hospital. At this point, we do know that the New York City Mayor's office has already been briefed on the situation down there, and they are responding and encouraging anybody in and around the areas to simply stay away. We do know that they're actively looking for the shooter, but we do not have any, or at least not much information on the current condition of the individuals that have been injured. And also a very key question that we'll have to answer here very soon here, Brooke, which is where did this happen? Was it in the hospital or simply on hospital grounds? Authorities simply confirming that location, which is again at 1650 Grand Concourse. But as you may imagine, this is a very busy area there on this Friday afternoon, Brooke.
Polo, thank you. Harry Houck is another voice is joining us. You know, former NYPD knows sadly how this goes. And so, Harry, we know that the police, the line is that they're actively searching for the shooter. But again, in a building this massive, can you just walk me through, Harry? You're on CNN. You're live with me with Brooke. How much of a challenge is it to what are they doing? Going floor by floor, trying to find the gunman. Walk me through what they're doing.
Yeah, well, basically, since they responded, hopefully getting the wounded out of there, people that were injured, they're talking to witnesses to see where the shots, took place. So apparently, it looks like they're going room by room to check this location to see, if they can track down the shooter. The hospital's probably surrounded. They probably have, emergency services on the scene. They're all geared up inside going after this guy. We don't know too much. Right now, we don't know if it's a typical active shooter attack or some person who might have worked for the hospital. We don't know that as of right now, but I can't see any video. I'm out on the street, so
sure. We're just looking at a lot of cop cars. No. And then you said
have any video right now, going on right now.
We're looking at it live. These are helicopter shots. We're just looking at the building. A lot of police and flashing lights in the front. I saw some ambulances, but they weren't moving. So I'm curious, when you just made your point that they'll try to get the wounded out of there, I mean, this is a hospital. Would they try to move them elsewhere to another hospital to be treated?
I would, unless they secured the emergency room, and then they would utilize the emergency room. I mean, it's a very important question. We have a shooting incident that occurred at a hospital. We have a gunman that is still probably in the same location being hunted by the police. Do we get our wounded out of there? And if there's a hospital close by, I would say that's probably the best bet. I'm sure the doctors that were on the scene at the hospital started working on the people that were injured right away. So that's a good thing. But I would tend to think that if they can secure the emergency room, they'd be utilizing that. So the whole problem is, how large is this hospital? And, where did the shooting occur? Was it inside? Was it outside?
Yeah, we don't know.
Did anybody see the shooter inside the hospital? See the shooter's last location? The witnesses, and that's where the police would be following that, and they'd be just doing a grid search through the hospital itself, trying to ascertain where the gunman is.
Got it. Harry, stay with me. I've got Shimon Prokopez on the phone. He's got some new information. Shimon, what are you learning?
Hey, Brooke, how are you? So obviously a pretty fast developing story. So what we're learning right now is that police believe the shooter is a former employee of the hospital. It's not clear what kind of work he did at the hospital, but I'm told by two separate law enforcement NYPD officials that they believe the shooter is a former employee. I'm also told that, several people have been injured. They believe some of them have been shot, but it's still, also unclear because I'm not sure that police have been able to do a proper search through the hospital. And also there's some concern that the gunman, the shooter, may still be in the hospital, Brooke.
Are your sources telling you, Shimon, where within the hospital this shooting happened?
No, that's not clear because most of the folks that I was talking to were just arriving on scene. And so obviously I couldn't get too much information out of them. But the little that they were able to give me was that they, basically that they believe this was a former employee and that people were shot They just didn't know how many.
Just one more quickly on the, do we know extent of injuries?
No, that I don't know either. I don't know how serious wounded any of the people are. It's kind of interesting because as I was talking to people, some people are still driving to the scene. Some others are there, but so it's sort of the police have to now gear up and come up with a plan and sort of get in the hospital and figure everything out. And so that's sort of it sounded to me like that's what they were in the process of starting to do.
Got it. Shimon, thank you so much for that nugget of information from your police sources. I'll let you hop off the phone and do a little bit more digging. Again, multiple people have been shot at a pretty busy hospital here in New York in the Bronx. This is the Bronx Lebanon Hospital. It's one of the busiest ERs in all of New York, we're told. Don't know the extent of injuries, but we just heard from Shimon reporting that the shooter here is believed to be a former hospital employee. Harry Halk, what do you make of that?
Yeah, well, just as we had thought, that once we probably have the shooter now identified. If it was a former employee, everybody's going to know who he is. He's probably been identified, and that the issue is that he knows the hospital a lot better than the police do. So it could be quite a task trying to track him down in the hospital area. I'm sure an alarm had went off, and hopefully, when the alarm went off, they were able to say who they were looking for. And I'm sure security in a hotel is helping the police because they can identify the shooter and identify this employee or former employee. And the police are probably running to his home, his address, trying to execute a warrant to get in there and see if there's any information that they can obtain to be able to try and help why this person attacked the hospital. So it's like I said, it could be a little hard because you have a shooter that actually knows the hospital and was an employee there. So it's going to be a tough task for the police to track him down unless he decides that he wants to engage them. We'll see a lot of incidents like this also. We find that, he could wind up killing himself also after he came in and committed the carnage that he wanted to whatever specific persons that he wanted to go after.
Though I imagine police, and they want him alive to prosecute, so he obviously so justice can be carried out here. Let me just point out, as we've been talking to a number of different law enforcement voices, we are told that the President of the United States is aware of this, according to the Deputy Press Secretary, and that she will keep us posted there from the White House. Art Roderick, to you, again, on this nugget that this shooter, who is still being actively sought, they don't know where he or she is a former hospital employee. To Harry's point, this individual, in a sense, has the upper hand, knows the corridors, knows the twists and turns in the hospital, the back stairwells, the rooms, the sort of secret rooms. How do law enforcement work with that?
Well, I think, knowing NYPD and their response, I'm sure they've rolled out every specialty unit, probably including their strategic response group that handles active shooters. They have heavy weapons. They have heavy body armor. They can handle situations like this. The odd thing here is now that we know the individual is a former employee, that kind of lowers the level, to me, in my eyes anyways, that this is some type of active terrorist issue. It could still be that way, but, it sounds to me like since we only have, right now is reported a couple people injured, this very well could be some type of personal dispute this individual had at the hospital. But again, we're talking about a hospital, a multi-level building. I'm sure that security at that hospital is very well trained, has worked with NYPD, knows how to respond to these active shooter situations. And at this point, to me, this much time has passed by. It just seems to me that they know where he is. They're just not putting it out exactly what they're doing, where they have him cornered, and what they're doing. But they also probably have the hostage response. Hostage negotiators also rolled out to be ready to talk to this individual.
Art Roderick, stay with me. Jason Carroll, one of our correspondents here in New York, he's joining me now. Jason, what more are you learning?
Well, just to recap what we've been learning here, Brooke, this incident occurring at just about 2:50 this afternoon. That's when reports came in that there was an active shooter there at Bronx Lebanon Hospital. We are hearing now that ATF agents are on their way to assist with that ongoing situation there. What we are hearing, multiple people shot at this point. Investigators there at the scene, law enforcement looking for this shooter who was apparently seen with some sort of long weapon that he was carrying walking through the facility. You've heard there from one of our producers who has indicated that perhaps this was a former employee that they're looking for. Again, the shooting did occur inside this hospital. Investigators at this point looking for the shooter as we speak. We should also note, for those who are unfamiliar with Bronx Lebanon Hospital, it's a very large facility here in New York City, 972 beds. Last year admitted some 138,000 patients at that facility, so it's a large facility there. Also private security at the hospital as well. They're well trained for these types of events, so they'll be assisting with this as well. Once again, this is a situation that began just shortly before 3 o'clock this afternoon. Active shooter situation there at Bronx Lebanon Hospital. Brooke?
You know, it's one of those things. We've covered a lot of shootings, Jason Carroll, but I can't recall, an active shooting situation at a hospital. And when you think of, we've all been in hospitals, and this is sort of one of those last places where I haven't seen, metal detectors. That's not a thing at hospitals.
Right. It's one of those things. I mean, anyone who's going to a hospital, obviously, you're going there for care, for treatment,
right.
Not one of these places where you're going to think a shooting is going to happen. But so sadly, we've seen shootings happen in so many places, schools, other types of facilities as well, and hospitals not seemingly to be immune from this as well.
Awful. Jason Carroll, thank you so much. Tom Fuentes.
Well, I think that there's only so much you can do to secure it. If you have the police on the outside, assuming the person hasn't run away.
Tom, let me just jump in. Forgive me, but let me just jump in. We just got information. The New York police is saying one shooter is dead. I don't know if there are multiple shooters, but I'm being told one shooter is dead. Go ahead, Tom.
Shooters that we have altogether. Do we know any more about that? Were there multiple shooters? Usually in a place like this, workplace type violence, it's one person has a grudge against the boss, co-workers, or the hospital administration itself and may want to cause this. So, the likelihood that you only had one shooter and that particular shooter is dead could mean that now they just have to check the rest of the building and check their video cameras and see if anybody else could have been involved in this. And maybe they could bring this to resolution fairly quickly. But to your earlier question, it's very difficult to secure a building like this because you can't evacuate the building. You can't get all of these
patients,
well, especially if they're hooked up to IVs. You can't get them out of there. So you're going to have to deal with the fact that a number of those patients are going to have to stay in the hospital, and a number of medical personnel are going to have to stay with them to care for them. So, yeah, it's a very difficult situation. Maybe we're going to find out that this has already been resolved.
Yeah, Tom Fuentes, thank you so much. We've been talking to Harry Houck, Art Roderick, Jason Carroll, Polo Sandoval. We've been watching the story unfolding here. And again, the latest on this hospital shooting in the New York area at the Bronx, at the Bronx Lebanon Hospital, is that New York police now saying one shooter is dead. This after this search for this shooter, after this individual apparently shot or wounded at least 4 to 6 people in this hospital. The extent of the injuries unknown. We're going to continue our coverage here in Washington. The lead starts right now with Jake Tapper.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Lead. We want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. I'm Jake Tapper. We're going to start with some breaking news in the national lead today. Multiple people have been shot at Bronx Lebanon Hospital in New York City after reports of an active shooter. NYPD sources say there are 4 to 6 victims injured in the shooting. NYPD is also saying at this hour the shooter is dead. He was killed apparently on the 16th floor of the hospital. It's unclear exactly how exactly he died. You're looking at the massive response to the scene right now. This is one of the busiest hospitals in New York. It's in the Bronx, which is in the northern part of Manhattan Island. White House officials say President Trump has been briefed. The New York Police Department says this all started a little more than an hour ago. Police sources telling CNN that they believe the shooter is a former employee. It is unclear what work that person may have done at the hospital. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms also just tweeted that they have special agents responding to the scene. Let's try to find out more now with CNN's Jason Carroll. Jason, what are you learning? What can you tell us?
Well, just to recap, Jake, this whole entire incident began just about 2:50, just a little bit before 3 o'clock. That's when the calls first started coming in about what was then an active shooter. But again, just getting word just within the past few moments that the shooter is, in fact, deceased. It is unclear how the shooter died. Did he die, of his own hands, or died at the hands of those who were there to stop him? That, at this point, is unclear. Also getting word that perhaps that this shooter was a former employee there at the hospital. That is still something that is being worked on, being confirmed. NYPD telling us anywhere between 4 and 6 people have been wounded. The extent of their injuries at this point, not clear. Again, ATF, NYPD, also including the hospital private security force. They were all there to assist while all this was going down. Just to give some folks just a little bit of context here of just how large this hospital is. Bronx, Lebanon Hospital, 972 beds. Last year treated some 138,000 patients, so it's a large facility. So you can imagine the challenge that these first responders had when they first got word that there was, in fact, at one point an active shooter there at the hospital, and what they had to do to try to end that situation. But once again, it appears at this point as if the active shooter has died. Once again, unclear if he died at his own hands or died as a result of those who were there to stop him. Jake?
All right, let's go to CNN, Shimon Proskopes. And Shimon, you've been talking to your sources. What are they telling you? Are there concerns about another shooter, perhaps?
Yeah, there's no indications, Jake, that there's another shooter. They believe they were dealing with this one shooter who they learned pretty quickly was a former, they believe to be a former employee. That's according to 2 law enforcement sources that I've been talking to. And I think now they're just sort of in the process of trying to clear the hospital, go through it, make sure they're not missing anything, make sure there are no other shooters, sort of the standard stuff we would expect in these situations. The other thing I'm told is they're now in the process of reviewing surveillance video in the hospital to exactly pinpoint where the shooter was, to figure out his movement, to see also if they're missing anything. And like, Jason said, they believe at least anywhere from 4 to maybe 6, or maybe even a little bit higher than that. Some folks may have been injured. Not everyone may have been shot, but that's not clear yet. And again, now it's just a process of trying to make sure that they can treat all the injured, Jake.
All right, and Shimon, I mean, obviously one of the things that's so alarming about this incident is that it took place inside a hospital. Shootings take place all over the country every day, unfortunately, in the United States. But this one inside a hospital where people are supposed to be protected, where people are supposed to be getting better. That's one of the reasons why this huge police presence, in addition to the 4 to 6 people who we've been told were shot.
That's right. So, I've been to that hospital before, and usually hospitals in the city are not as closed off, and you can probably have access. He probably could have gained access fairly easily into the hospital. And if he was a former employee, that's probably, maybe someone recognized him and let him in. But we don't know how he got in yet. And, so we don't even know. We have not been able to say, for sure 100% that this is a doctor or what kind of employee of the hospital. Police know his identity. Police know who the shooter is. They just have not told us who he is.
All right, Shimon, thanks. Keep bringing us more reporting as you get it. Let me bring in Tom Fuentes right now. He's a former assistant director of the FBI and a CNN law enforcement analyst. And Tom, in a situation like this, when law enforcement comes to the building, what's going through their minds? What do they have to decide to do?
Well, typically, Jake, they have to try to figure out how many shooters are they dealing with. Is the shooter or shooters still active in the building? Have they escaped and run down the street somewhere else and pose an extended threat? Then, of course, the main thing is to make sure they can find every victim and get medical care for the people that need it, rescue any injured parties that are inside there. So they have a crime scene, they have rescued people needing rescue, they have an investigation, they have a fugitive search. All of this is going on at the same time, and they're used to dealing with all of these things simultaneously and train for it, practice for it. It's not the first hospital incident we've had. A few months ago, we had, the call of an active shooter in, I think, the San Diego Medical Naval Center complex. But if this is similar, you had somebody going to the scene of that hospital wanting to shoot a particular person or a particular group of persons, whether it's a former supervisor or co-workers or just general employees or patrons or patients because they're mad at the hospital management itself. But it's more of a personal matter, not a global terrorism type incident when that type of thing occurs. So that's among the immediate considerations, is how to secure that, how to find out who is posing a risk to the public and how much risk is still at the scene when you get there.
And a reminder for all our viewers tuning in, we're watching right now, you're looking at images from Bronx Lebanon Hospital, where a shooting took place just before 3 o'clock Eastern is when the reports for the police, the request for police assistance went out. We are told 4 to 6 people have been injured. The Assistant Police Commissioner for Communications and Public Information, J. Peter Donald, just put out a tweet 11 minutes ago saying that one shooter is deceased at the hospital. Tom Fuentes, let me note here, the Peter Donald saying one shooter is deceased at the hospital. That's very careful language he's using. He's saying one shooter. He's not saying the shooter. There may be more shooters for all they know, and it's a reminder to everyone that at the early stages of a crisis, of a tragedy like this, there is a lot of information we do not know, and often a lot of the information that we get from authorities, whether law enforcement or government authorities, is later proven incorrect. They're being very cautious, very circumspect with their words.
No, that's true, and that's why even if witnesses tell the police that respond that there was only one shooter and now that shooter either self-inflicted or by a security guard has been killed, the police aren't going to just accept that as fact and go from there. They're going to still search that entire building, every closet, every possible place another shooter could hide if there is more than one shooter. So until they talk to all the witnesses, until they talk to other employees that may know this former employee, until they review all the video surveillance of the hospital and in the hospital, at that point they may be willing, within a few hours to rule out that there's anybody else involved, that there are multiple shooters. But certainly at the beginning of this, they're not going to take anybody's word for that being the case.
And also, Tom Fuentes, one of the things that's so challenging for police right now is they obviously cannot leave the scene. I mean, they're right now they're taking witness accounts and the like, but they can't leave until they know that definitively that there was only one shooter, and that means they're going to have to not only look at the surveillance video, but look into every single room in that enormous hospital.
No, that's right. Every one of these incidents, they have to do an entire building clearing operation, and oftentimes it can take 1 to 5 hours, depending on the size of the building. Additionally, if you have a former employee, they have to take into account that person, if he went in there with help with other shooters, would know exactly, where to hide or where the closets are, the air ducts, the heating and air conditioning plant, maintenance facilities, all of the inside information that the average patient or someone visiting the hospital would never know about, would never see. So, yeah, they have to take all that into consideration. It takes time. Now, fortunately, you've got an enormous, qualified, great police department, NYPD. All the help that they need, they're going to get from federal agencies, ATF. No doubt the FBI and other federal agencies have come to lend assistance, to lend manpower, to lend individuals able to process the crime scene for evidence, able to help with going through witnesses, interviews, look at videotapes, all of that. So they will be able to bring an enormous amount of resources to bear immediately, and already have, no doubt. So that helps in the situation. But yeah, the building clearing of a hospital and possibly neighboring buildings is quite an undertaking and will take some time.
If you're just joining us, you're looking at images from Bronx Lebanon Hospital Center in New York City, north of Manhattan in the Bronx. There was a shooting there. sometime, we believe, between the 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock hour Eastern. We're told by law enforcement that 4 to 6 individuals have been injured. In addition, the New York Police Department is also saying that a shooter is dead and at the hospital. We're not sure if there was only one shooter or not. We have no indication there was more than one, but you never know. And law enforcement authorities are being very circumspect with the information they are sharing. Let's bring in right now CNN law enforcement analyst Art Roderick. He's a former assistant director with the U.S. Marshal's Office. And Art, right now, what is the priority for authorities as they go into this building?
Well, right now, I mean, the first thing I would do as a responding law enforcement officer, and I know that the security at the hospital and NYPD probably have done a lot of training together for just these types of circumstances. The security that's running the hospital probably has the best idea of what's going on. So you have a combination of security working with NYPD, but also a group of detectives or police officers actually viewing the videotape. These hospitals are videotaped very heavily with sophisticated type cameras, and to follow that individual around as quickly as you can to coordinate this with anybody. Is he on a handheld? Is he on a cell phone while he's going through this whole scenario? And that really is going to help you determine, is this one shooter or more than one shooter? And law enforcement will always, until they can 100% confirm that, hey, we have a shooter down as opposed to the shooter, because they look at the worst case scenario and they have yet to determine if there's another shooter in there or not yet.
And the security guards at a hospital such as this, would local police be stationed there, or would they have their own private security?
On some of the larger hospitals, they have their own armed security. A lot of the individuals would be retired law enforcement officers, but a lot of them do have their own armed security. I'm not sure about this particular hospital, but a lot of them will drill with the local police departments on active shooter scenarios.
Art Roderick, stay with us. We've just learned that the mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, is headed to Bronx Lebanon Hospital Center, where there was a shooting not long ago. We also anticipate a news conference soon. Let's go back to CNN's Jason Carroll, who has the latest information. Jason.
Yes, and expecting a statement actually from the hospital in just about 30 minutes from now. The mayor was briefed on the situation earlier this afternoon as the developments were unfolding there at the hospital. We should also note of the reports that we're getting, anywhere once again from 4 to 6 people who were wounded. The extent of their injuries at this point unclear. What is also unclear, Jake, is who these people, these victims are. Were they patients? Were some of them doctors or nurses there at the hospital? That is something that has not been released at this point. Investigators are going to be reviewing security cameras. We're going to be reviewing security cameras at the hospital, so we're going to be getting any information that we can once they are able to review those particular cameras. Again, it's a large facility, as I've said before, 972 beds there, 138,000 patients were treated there just last year. And I'm just going to get some new information here for you, Jake, here. Apparently, a law enforcement source tells us that the shooter died from a self-inflicted wound, and that there was a victim found next to him, a female victim found next to him. Apparently, that female victim died from her wounds. This is information now just being handed to me as we speak. Once again, law enforcement source telling us that that a shooter died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and found next to him a female victim, unidentified at this point, but certainly we had already told you that there were 4 to 6 people who were injured now. Unfortunately, you have to report that one of those victims has died as a result of what happened there.
And the shooter, we were already told, or a shooter, was dead at the hospital. We assume it's the same shooter who took his own life at the hospital and was taken, and it is at the same exact hospital. Let's go back to Tom Fuentes, of course, the former FBI assistant director. And Tom, when the police enter this, how do you secure a hospital like this? You have to stop everybody from entering and exiting. How do you do that with a hospital?
No, you do it. You lock it down. Obviously, the patients that are bedridden aren't going to be able to go out the door and run away. So you've got to make sure they're safe and secure. Medical personnel would have to stay with them. So unlike the average office building, you can't just evacuate the building. You have people there that can't be moved. It would be more dangerous to move them than to leave them and try to protect them. But in this situation, if the reporting is true that the person died, the shooter died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound, then that's going to be about a 95% situation of being just one shooter. You're not going to have a shooter gather up a bunch of friends, go in, and all of them commit suicide. So it's a pretty good indication that I think police will probably clear this entire building in a pretty short order. By the time they've looked at the video surveillance, by the time they've talked to the surviving victims and have them describe, was there more than one person? Was there someone with the shooter when he was shooting at you? If they hear that it's pretty much just one person and that person has killed himself, this is going to be declared over pretty soon. And then it's just a crime scene, and the forensic people will have hours and hours of work to do afterward.
I don't know if you've ever worked a case at a hospital before, Tom, but in a situation like this, would emergency room patients, would ambulances be diverted to other hospitals? Would they be told not to come to Bronx, Lebanon?
Yeah, sure. They would be broadcasting. The police would be aware of it. The emergency services, fire department, and others would be aware that they have a potential tactical, dangerous situation at that hospital. And absolutely, they would be diverted to other emergency rooms. And in a situation like this, we're not in a situation of response to catastrophic events like 9/11, where every hospital in Manhattan and the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens would be jammed potentially with people coming in. So in this situation, where it's fairly routine business for most of the hospitals in New York City, with the exception of this one hospital, it wouldn't be that big of a problem to divert incoming patients to a nearby hospital if they're coming into emergency rooms.
Art Roderick, formerly of the U.S. Marshal Service, let me ask you if the reporting and information we're getting is correct and the shooter took his own life. Does that change the calculation for law enforcement as they seek to secure the building, as Tom Fuentes was suggesting?
No, I agree with Tom. It absolutely does. I mean, it sounds to me more like a domestic type situation than anything else. It's just going to be interesting to find out how those other 4 or 5 people were injured. Were they injured trying to get away, or did he have to actually inflict other wounds on individuals to get to the target individual that he wanted? But it sounds like to me that this was more like a murder-suicide type situation than anything else. And more than likely, law enforcement already has on their mind how this occurred, who the individual is, what occurred, what domestic situation was happening, and also helps them in the response, that they don't have to do this massive type counterterrorism response that we've seen in other cases.
Would that mean that the police would not need to clear the whole building and check every room?
They're still going to do that as a standard protocol. I mean, Tom talked about, you asked the question about, them diverted to other hospitals for emergency rooms and medical care, and that's automatically built into their standard security protocols. So they're going to finish their active shooter protocol, which means they'll be clearing that whole building and making sure everybody's okay. I'm sure there's a lot of individuals that work at the hospital that are sheltered in place, that are locked behind doors, and law enforcement is going to go around and make sure every one of those doors is cleared, every one of those rooms is cleared.
If you're just joining us, you were looking at live pictures from the Bronx, New York. There was a shooting earlier this afternoon at Bronx Lebanon Hospital Center, which is in the Bronx, north of Manhattan, on Manhattan Island. We've been told by law enforcement sources that 4 to 6 people were injured. We're also told by the NYPD on the record that one shooter is dead in the hospital. We've been told by law enforcement sources that shooter took his own life, apparently with his gun, and that next to him was the body of a woman. The police are still investigating the scene. They are presumably going room to room and making sure there are not any other shooters, there is not any more danger. Presumably they are also looking at surveillance videos to figure out what happened exactly. Obviously, with a giant hospital such as this, the sooner that they can reopen it for the citizens of the Bronx and Manhattan, the better. But that is the status as of right now. Shimon Proskopis is one of the several reporters reporting the story out for us. Shimon, what can you tell us? Shimon, can you hear me? We're having problems with Shimon's communications. We'll get to him in a second. Let's go to Jason Carroll right now to get us up to speed. And Jason, you were last telling us that Mayor Bill de Blasio has been briefed and is on his way to Bronx Lebanon Hospital. We've also been told that President Trump has been briefed in the White House. What more do you know?
Right, just a little bit more information, Jake, about what's been happening. We are told once again that one person, a female, was killed during this incident, found next to a shooter who was there at the hospital, who apparently died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. We are told that there are 5 now other victims as well. Unclear about the identity of those victims. Are they doctors, nurses, other patients? That's still unclear. We'll get you confirmation on that. We can tell you that 3 of those other victims now are in serious condition with gunshot wounds. Also hearing from a source a little bit more about the shooter that once again died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Apparently, all this happening up on the 16th floor of the hospital. He was wearing a lab coat and also had some sort of ID on him, identification on him as well. Apparently, Jake, one of the witnesses describing what was seen inside, describing blood on the walls, blood on a staircase at the facility as well. So a horrendous scene there at the hospital. And you also have to imagine what investigators are dealing with, but the hospital themselves, the folks who work there, not only do you have an active investigation going on there, but you also have hundreds and hundreds of patients that need to be treated as well there at the hospital. But once again, 5 other victims. We are told 3 of them are in serious condition with gunshot wounds. 1 victim deceased, a shooter deceased as well. Jake.
All right, Jason Carroll, thank you so much. Joining me on the phone right now is CNN law enforcement analyst Harry Houck. He's also a retired NYPD detective. And Harry, obviously the information we're getting is fresh, and we're still expecting a whole bunch more information. And obviously also a lot of the early information that we get from law enforcement officials on the record and off the record is later amended or corrected as the larger investigation takes hold. But with all those caveats in mind, as a detective, if you came upon the scene, you see a shooter who has taken his own life, and next to him is the body of a woman. What is the operating presumption to where the investigation would start?
Well, that's the first thing that jumped in my mind here. As soon as I found out that the shooter had killed himself and had killed a woman that was next to him, appears to me, I take a close look at the relationship between that woman and that shooter. You have 5 wounded. I don't know if their wounds are life-threatening or not, but it's a clear indication to me that there might have been some type of relationship between that woman and that shooter. Of course, I can't tell you 100%. That investigation will, clear that up. But I think that's going to be that'd be something. One of the things I'd be focusing on right now, and also the fact that I think that the police department could probably ascertain quickly if there was another shooter. We can see in most disgruntled employees or maybe a love triangle or something like that, it's usually just one shooter. Of course, the protocol is to go ahead and search that whole hospital for a possible second shooter that it looks like doesn't exist. So what happens is, they're watching, they're looking at that video, and they can see that there was only one shooter that came into that hospital, committed the carnage he did up there on the 16th floor. And I'm sure one of the bosses are going to make a decision or whether or not the police department should, consider searching the rest of that hospital because it is so big. But the good thing about the NYPD is that they have the manpower. And even if they threw 50, 60, 70, terrorism responders from the police department into that hospital, they could still search that hospital pretty quickly. But I think most likely that some boss is going to make the decision that this is over and now treat it as a crime scene.
Harry, let me just ask you, we're looking at live pictures right now of emergency medical responders, the NYPD, ATF, others outside the hospital. They do not seem at least visually, to be particularly alarmed right now or on a state of high alert. Is that something that you would assess if you were walking by and you saw people looking as if they were not particularly concerned that possibly the situation is over?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think the situation's over based on what I'm seeing here. It's now a crime scene. Like I said, the odds of having a second shooter are pretty slim to none, and the video is going to clear all that up for the police department. But they might just go ahead and, search the whole hospital anyway. One of the big concerns is, here's a guy who came in and it looks like he wanted to commit a certain amount of carnage to a certain amount of people, and he wanted to hurt a certain amount of people. I think most likely that woman. He could have easily went into one of those hospital rooms and held them hostage, and we'd be sitting here with the hostage negotiators trying to talk his way out. So I think this guy's plan was to go in there, kill specific people or persons, all right, and go in there and then kill himself, which we see time in and time again with these disgruntled employees or love triangles or love relationships that the shooter usually does kill himself and the police never get a chance to take him out, or face him at all. It's usually all done by the time the police arrive.
All right.
Because, you figure the first 2 to 5 minutes is the amount of time that when you have an incident like this, that all the carnage has already been committed.
Let's bring in CNN law enforcement analyst right now, James Gagliano. He's a retired FBI special agent. And James, it seems like we don't see too many hostage situations anymore. Obviously, that's a good thing. It seems like these situations resolve themselves more quicker than I recall them happening 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, Jake, you're absolutely right. The days of the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s era style, long drawn out, barricaded subject, they just seem to be so far in the rearview mirror now. I think during this current 21st century era, what we're experiencing now is it's a different paradigm. You're either dealing with terrorists who are just trying to maximize the amount of carnage and destruction that they can wreak in a short amount of time and then martyr themselves either by cop or by killing themselves, or you've got an incident like this appears to be, which is a workplace-type violence situation where, again, whether it's a love triangle gone wrong or whether or not it's just a disgruntled employee, they're looking to kill a number of people and then either take their own life or induce the police to take their lives for them. So there are no more, it's not Dog Day Afternoon in 1975 where you've got the NYPD out there behind a patrol car negotiating with these folks and delaying and stalling and attempting to get hostages released. It just seems we are quickly moving toward this paradigm where first responders have to be equipped and prepared to neutralize and to immediately bring a halt to the killings. And I think that's what the NYPD is equipped to do, along with the federal assets, including the FBI in New York City. You've got 35,000 cops. I think Harry mentioned every hospital in the 5 boroughs has got a lockdown plan. When you're in an urban area or an area that has a predisposition at times to violence or, you deal with shootings, you have to be equipped to do that. And it looks like the hospital did go into that, and hopefully that was something that could have saved lives. And then lastly, Jake, I think, what we've been teaching folks with active shooters for the last 10 years, that's changing too. It used to be we told folks to run. If you can't do that, hide. And if you can't do that, fight back. Well, the hiding aspect, unless you're in a concrete bunker, you can able to really lock yourself in and be safe and secure. When these folks are just looking to kill as many folks as possible and they're not looking to negotiate, it really becomes run or fight. Either try to get yourself out of the area as quickly as possible or fight back. That seems to be the new tactic that unfortunately we're moving towards.
Fascinating. James, stay with us. I do want to bring in on the phone Crystal Rivera. She was a patient on the 16th floor of the hospital when this incident took place. She's now outside the hospital. Crystal, first of all, we're glad you're safe. Thank you so much. I understand you did not physically, with your eyes, witness something, but you did hear the shooting. Tell us what you heard. Crystal, are you there? All right, we're still working out some of the sound issues. James, let me go back to you. James Gagliano, retired FBI special agent. When does the FBI decide that they are going to take over a crime scene such as this, or at least offer help to local police authorities? Is there a certain kind of crime where they always do it? Is there a certain kind of crime where they never do it? What's the decision-making process?
Well, Jake, where we go back to is 1995. There was a presidential decision directive 39 that was signed under President Clinton at the time, which basically said in an incident like this, we have to assume terrorism first, and then we work backwards from that. So in any incident where it is presumed to be terrorism, we automatically give the Federal Bureau of Investigation purview. Now listen, in New York City there are 1,200 FBI agents. There are 35,000 police officers. So they have vastly more resources, and we work in concert with them, and there is a collaboration along all the federal agencies, the state police, as well as the NYPD, because New York City is such a target. So in something like this, we presume it's terrorism. Obviously, the FBI is not going to be the first responder there because, there are police officers scattered throughout the 5 boroughs that have much more proximity to a situation like this. We assume it's terrorism until we can determine, as seems to be in this instance, that it's not, that it's workplace violence or something like that. And then unless there's some type of nexus to a federal crime, like let's say this happened at Fort Hamilton on U.S. federal property, unless there's some nexus to a federal crime or it's part of gang violence or something like that, then the NYPD would have purview because it would be worked as a simple homicide case. And so that's all being worked out. But in the initial aftermath of this, the biggest advancements we've made since 9/11 is agencies, federal agencies, agents, officers, troopers, they're not showing up at crime scenes and introducing themselves and exchanging business cards. As Harry pointed out, they've worked together. They've conducted exercises together. So the folks that respond know each other, and it is a seamless operation. It's much more collaboratively than it was pre-9/11.
Bronx Lebanon Hospital in the Bronx, you're looking at images of it. There was a shooting there just a few hours ago in New York City. One shooter is dead. It might be the only shooter. Apparently, according to law enforcement sources, a self-inflicted wound. Next to him was the body of a woman. Her identity has not yet been revealed publicly. Bronx Lebanon Hospital, one of the biggest hospitals in New York, has almost 1,000 hospital beds at 2 major hospital divisions. Among those individuals at the hospital today, Crystal Rivera, who was on the 16th floor of the hospital. She's now safely outside the hospital. Crystal, are you there?
I can hear, but not that much.
Tell us.
It's a little low on my side.
Tell us what you heard today. Crystal, tell us what you heard.
Hello.
Crystal, it's Jake Tapper. Can you hear me?
I don't hear anything.
We're obviously still having some audio issues with Crystal. Obviously, this is a situation where we didn't have a camera in place. Let me go to Jason Carroll, who's still covering this from our New York City bureau. Jason, get us up to speed. What's the latest?
Well, again, hearing that this shooter in this particular situation died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, Jake. We've been reporting that for the past several minutes. What is unclear at this point is where the shooting started. We know where it ended, the 16th floor of Bronx Lebanon Hospital. Unclear at this point where it started. Did it start on another floor and then end up on that floor? That's just going to be part of the investigation going forward. Shortly after the shooting started, just before 3 o'clock at about 2:50 p.m., the hospital immediately went into lockdown. Investigators then started doing a floor-by-floor search of the suspect, who once again was found on the 16th floor from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. A female victim, deceased, found next to his body. There are 5 other victims. 3 of those victims, we are told, are in serious condition with gunshot wounds. It is unclear at this point if those victims are doctors, nurses, other patients. That information should be forthcoming. ATF special agents are out there there at the scene. You're looking right now at the scene as you see NYPD there at the scene, as well as hospital private security. Mayor de Blasio has been briefed on the situation. He is en route. He should be there at Bronx Lebanon Hospital very, very shortly. We are also expecting a statement from the hospital shortly as well. You were talking before about just how large this hospital is. Just to give our viewers who are unfamiliar with the facility, 972 beds there, 138,000 patients served there last year. Very large facility, so you can imagine just how difficult it would have been once this shooting was an active shooting situation for law enforcement to get out there, get this facility on lockdown, and do that floor-by-floor search when everything was going on. But once again, the situation, that shooter, that suspect, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound there on the 16th floor. I should also add one witness describing the scene there, saying blood was on the walls and in the stairwell of the facility there as well. Jay.
All right, Jason Carroll bringing us the latest. If you're just joining us, there was a shooting just a few hours ago at the Bronx Lebanon Hospital Center in the Bronx, New York. And we will bring you more information when we get more information. But for now, let's turn to our politics lead.